Welcome back to the Empire State Sports Report podcast. I'm your host, Adrianna. Today, I am joined by the senior draft analyst of Ourlads Scouting, Dave Syvertsen. We finally met in person at the Senior Bowl in Alabama last week. So today, we're going to recap the Senior Bowl, talk about our players who ascended on the board. We're going to talk quarterbacks and all sorts of stuff. So what was your experience at the Senior Bowl? How was it for you?
Awesome experience. It's always great for a lot of reasons. To see guys live playing football, seeing guys that are everyone on the field, they're competing against and with future NFL players, where you can't always say that when you're watching the tape. I'm really selective with which tape I watch when I'm evaluating, because I'm not really interested in watching guys that are never going to play a snap in the NFL. But this is why that this week is so valuable. And it's also great just to network and see some faces, meet you in person. Like, that's part of the reason why you go down there, is just to kind of network and chat with people, put a face to a name and watch guys play against future NFL players.
Yeah, definitely. On the plane on the way home, I actually met Quincy Wilson, who was a running back for the Falcons. He's now a coach for Fairmount.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
So anyway, we were talking quarterbacks and all that sorts of stuff. He's a Bears fan, so we were talking about Ben Johnson, but he said the same thing about the networking aspect. And now he's headed to New Orleans next week to do some Super Bowl stuff. So
nice. That's awesome.
I was like, okay, that's going to be my goal next year, is get a Super Bowl invite out of the Senior Bowl.
Super Bowl, combine. I mean, if you have the funds and the time, I mean, there's so much to do between the end of the season and the actual NFL draft. And that is where, I mean, I think that's the end goal for a lot of people that want to really pursue this, is that you got to put yourself out there as much as you can.
Definitely. I would like them to switch up the Shrine Bowl, because I didn't really get a chance to follow that at all, because it's the same week. And one of the players that I like coming out of South Carolina had a great week there. Yep. This year, Sanders, and I don't think Ward practiced at all either, but I think it's just interesting to see both games and the practices and how things go, and kind of get a good idea of what it's like there too.
Yeah, there's a little rivalry between the Shrine and the Senior Bowl, and as many people know, here at Ourlads, we picked those rosters for East West Shrine for a few years back when it was in Tampa Bay, where the Rays play their home games, and it's. I don't remember ever hearing any sort of drama between the two games, but now it seems like they're kind of competing for the same players, the same weeks, the same TV time. And I think that the more that goes on, the more you're taking away opportunities for the kids and media, which at the end of the day, that's who this is most important for. It's not the egos and people that run these games. It's all about the players. And I hope at some point they can mend fences and separate it by at least a week, so we could go to both and get it, or at least monitor both.
Right. And we have the time. This is the off season now. Let us go to both. So with that being said, one thing that I thought was really interesting, especially after talking to some other creators, one of them being from Philly, was the difference in when you're at the Senior Bowl and what you're watching versus what people are tweeting, the ones who are not there. Yeah. So let's talk about Jackson Dart specifically, because he had a pretty good week. He didn't look like Patrick Mahomes. Like, I don't think that he elevated himself to the point where, he's going to go number one overall. But now there's all these reports from media people, some who were there, some who were not there, saying that, he elevated himself to maybe the top 2 or the top 3 quarterback in the draft. And, I saw some good things out of him, no question. But I also, especially during the game, saw some not some good things out of him. And look, I don't expect any quarterback coming out of the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, whatever. I don't expect any one of them to be perfect. But, in my opinion, I don't think he did enough to really elevate him to being number 2 for the quarterbacks overall. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, in regard to, the different opinions, I mean, I don't mind different opinions, because I think if we all have the same opinion on a guy, there's no fun in listening to anyone talk. But I do notice the same thing as you, that a lot of people that were not there were the ones that said Jackson Dart played well and could be a guy that's going to go in the top 10 just because of X, Y, Z. And that's the highlight era that we live in. He did make a lot of nice throws. There were some touchdowns and deep passes, but if you didn't see the 6 throws in between, you might have a very different opinion than someone that was watching every single throw, or at the very least watch the practice tape. And Jackson Dart, and I'm going to say this a lot probably over the next week on the different appearances, like this draft class and these players in particular, most of them were exactly what I thought they would be in terms of, hey, he can make big throws. He's got a great build. He's a very stocky 220 pounds, a pretty short wingspan. He's not a tall guy. So I like how sturdy he is. And I like how quickly he can get the ball out, but there's mechanical flaws with his footwork, especially with that back foot. You see that in person. And you see him try to make throws that he probably shouldn't make. And it's a risk taker, but also I'm not sure he sees everything. And that's one of the most alarming parts of his scouting report that I have, is I'm not sure he truly feels where the defense is like some of these other guys. So to sum that up, good player, fun player. He's going to be a guy worth trying to develop, but it's a little too rich for me to call him a top 10 pick.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed during the game is that was like giving me flashbacks to Jones, was that he seems to not feel pressure at all. Like I watched multiple guys come in on his blind side and there was no awareness or feel to that at all, which, I don't know. And maybe you can talk to this, is that something that can develop over time? And maybe with the right coaching, it can be. But I also think at some point, if you've played a certain amount of years in college, like I think there's certain things that can be improved upon. And I don't know if that's one of them. I mean, Jones never improved on that. And I'm not saying that Jackson Dart is as bad of a quarterback as Daniel Jones has been for the Giants over the years, but it's one of the things that I noticed that both him and Jones had in common. And that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, and that's called PTSD when you're looking at players and trying to project them to this future. I saw a couple balance issues from a couple offensive linemen, and I just started thinking Evan Neal again. That's part of recall, and that's part of how developing yourself as an evaluator is. You need to have that memory, and it should stick with you a little bit. It shouldn't make decisions for you, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, even though it's wrong. And so if you watch Daniel Jones and you go after the same traits he had and ignore some of the weak points that he had, that's kind of insane. And as an evaluator, as a coach, as a GM, so I do see some of the comparisons with not being able to see and feel everything between him and Daniel Jones. I think Jackson Dart has a little bit more kind of swag, toughness. I can deal with contact. That's again another, hear me pop that up into his report a few times. He's strong. He's a sturdy kid. He's not afraid of contact because he can break some tackles and make something happen. But to speak to your point, the kid started 41 games in college. And when you don't feel a defense, you don't feel a pass rush after all of that experience, that's a problem. And I don't think there was a quarterback that struggled with taking snaps from under center more this week than Dart. And again, this is a contrast between the NFL and college, that you're in shotgun 99 out of 100 plays in college, if not more. And you now taking a snap under center and having to go through progressions as you're moving backwards with pass rushers running towards you. It's a different style of football. And that's another reason why if you draft a Jackson Dart, that's why I've been asked about Bo Nix comparisons. I don't think there's anything close to Bo Nix and Jackson Dart. So other than the fact that they played in the Senior Bowl, and that's where the similarities end. So Jackson Dart, to me, that's why I won't have a first-round grade on him. He's not a year one guy. He's someone that you're going to develop, and you hopefully really work on getting better under center, getting better at feeling pressure, getting better with your footwork, and then and only then do you want to rely on him as your franchise saver.
Yeah. Let's talk about Milroe now, because Milroe had a tough week. And I know he kind of ended the football season on also a tough note. So when it comes to things like the Senior Bowl, obviously 1 week of practice and games, you're talking about 4 days versus, the 12 or how many games he played just this year alone. So where does what they do during the Senior Bowl week come into your evaluation level?
It's never going to sway a grade by more than a round, like unless something catastrophic happens, like, unless they were dealt a really bad deck of cards in college or a really good deck of cards with their situation, their coaching situation, the town around them. And all of a sudden you go to the Senior Bowl and you see a completely different player. And I can't recall right now. There's no one off the top of my head that made a major move this year, but you can definitely move your way down a stack. I think, in my opinion, when you are talking about, does someone move up or down a round or two? Where does the Senior Bowl evaluation fall in line? It is really meant to help stack the players. Like right now, you have a general feel for where some of these guys should go in the draft, but you have 6 guys that you are putting into this tier. You watch them live and you watch them against all future pros on the field at the same time. You could say, all right, this guy was visibly much better in person. So instead of him being at the top of that group of 6, you call it, he's now 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6. And that inevitably could, especially at quarterback, that could bump you down 2 rounds. That doesn't mean his grade is 2 rounds lower. It just means that other guys, you feel more confident with them after watching them in person. And Jalen Milroe, after watching him throw, after watching, I don't want to make too much of a stink about it, but he's got his hands measured in very small. And now that you know that as an objective fact, when you see him bounce balls, when you see him air balls, when you see just a very inconsistent control of the football when he's throwing it, it makes you wonder, is that what he's always going to be? Because I'll tell you this right now, if he doesn't take a significant jump as a passer at the next level, he is not a starting quarterback. He's just not. He's not a starting quarterback. And to me, if you're not a starting quarterback, I'm not looking at you until round 4. And that, I think a lot of the league feels that way too. So as much as Jalen Milroe has had first-round discussions, all right, around his name, he's not there. And there's a lot of reasons to think that. I'm actually leaning towards, I don't know if he's there as a 2nd or 3rd round pick. And he will go because of the traits. But that's just my personal view on him. I do think he will go day 2. But personally, what I saw and what I read over and over, and then you combine that with the tape, he's a lot further away than I thought he would be. And now I'm questioning the upside as a passer.
That's a little concerning.
Yeah. I mean, hey, and I feel like I might be in the minority there. I think a lot of people are going to bring up an Anthony Richardson or Lamar Jackson, and because those guys are such elite athletes and they can throw the ball, he can spin it. And what I mean by that is, the Zebra Technologies, they measure how many times the ball, how many revelations of the ball have when they come out. And that is basically just torque. That comes from the ability to really spin the football. And his was higher than everyone. He has a powerful arm and he does have deep ball success. So that alone is enough for some people to say, hey, I'll gamble on it because he's got something to work with. And he's probably the best athlete on the field the second he steps foot on it. So but I don't trust him as a passer. And I've been burned by this before. You fall in love with the highlight reel plays, the running, the dreaming of what he can be, but you got to be able to throw the football.
Well, then it's tough because you see someone like Josh Allen, and I saw some interview with him during the season that he talks about this one guy that he really worked with to focus on his mobility and the way that drastically helped him become more accurate. So I could see how people see things like that and are like, okay, well, if we just bring in the right person to coach, or we just bring in, the right guy who can teach him X, Y, and Z, then that's going to help him get to the next level. And, I just, where I'm at with the Giants right now, I just don't have the confidence in them that they're going to do that.
That's fair. And here's another thing in relation to the Giants. It's a fascinating discussion that could probably go on for hours. They're going to draft a quarterback this year. I would bet my mortgage on it. They're going to draft. Don't hold me to that. They're going to draft a quarterback this year. Okay. Is it the first round, second round, third round, fourth round? I think it's one of those first 4 rounds. What quarterback do you feel most confident in that you can develop into a guy that helps you keep your job? And I think it's someone that you probably are going to have to put on the field in 2024. You can't, or 2025. You can't go to ownership and say, hey, we just went 3-14 again. But hey, this guy looked really good in practice that we drafted in the 3rd round. Can I keep my job? So Milroe, to me, the only thing you'll get out of him in year 1 is the ability to run. He could be an offensive weapon. He could be a guy that you bring in on certain looks. And I don't think that's what the Giants need right now. They need a guy that they can really get behind.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's so much talk and hype around Sanders, is that he is the most NFL ready quarterback out of everyone coming out. And I agree with that. My thing is just all of this stuff that comes out this time of year, you just have to take it with a grain of salt, especially when it's coming from the player. Like, how many times did we hear last year? The Giants love JJ McCarthy. They would never pass on him if he's there. JJ McCarthy, oh, I was at the Giants building on Saturday and Sunday over Easter weekend, and we had great conversations and blah, blah, blah. And then passed right over him for Neighbors.
Yep. Yeah. It's smokescreen season. You can't believe everything you hear. The Giants have gotten better at keeping things quiet. In years past, it was almost laughable how predictable it was that who they were going to draft, no matter where they were. But last year I was surprised they didn't take the quarterback. And, looking back on it, hindsight's 2020, you don't criticize them for it, but you do kind of consider, like, did they misread the Daniel Jones situations for a third time? They misread that situation 3 times, and they had multiple quarterbacks staring them in the face last year. And now you're going into this draft not knowing if any of them are even worthy of taking. And so this is what quarterback hell is.
Yeah. I know. And we talked about this at the Senior Bowl, that I think our biggest fear is them drafting a quarterback, whatever it is at this point this year. They end up playing him for the second half of the year. They win a couple games, and then John Mara says, all right, well, I'll give you more time with the rookie quarterback. And then they don't draft one in 2026, which is known to be the better quarterback class.
Yeah. I mean, that happened in 2019. They took Daniel Jones, and then they kind of took him out of the discussion to go after a Justin Herbert or Tua, they because they had their guy, and you can't draft a first round quarterback 2 years in a row. And, I think the lesson learned here is you keep drafting guys until you know for a fact this is the dude, and you can never, and if both of them work out, you have the best problem in the world, and you can chop one of them, but it's, if they draft a quarterback this year and they're not sure about him next year, and they're staring someone in the face that is a much better prospect, no question in my mind, you take that quarterback.
Yeah. And I have like the tiniest bit of hope that just because it's not Dave Gettleman anymore, that after the whole Daniel Jones situation and not drafting a quarterback this year and seeing what they're dealt with this year, that they've learned their lesson and they will not make the same mistake twice. Although
we'll see.
Joe did it with the swing tackle situation. So don't feel great about it.
Only time will tell.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right, let's talk about one more quarterback and then we can move on to other positions. Dillon Gabriel. And I thought Riley Leonard also did a good job. I didn't really see any major issues. I think we agreed that Dillon Gabriel looked the best out of the group, but the concern there is his size. Seeing him on the field up close, I was like, wow, he is small.
Yeah. I mean, I in the back of my head, I think Seneca Wallace from Iowa State, who was a 5th round pick, maybe 4 or 5 year backup in the NFL, is the only guy that I can remember being that small at quarterback that actually lasted past his rookie contract. And Dillon Gabriel, I'm not going to quit him because of the height, but I'm also not going to draft him before round 4 because of the height, because it just, you have to use history somewhat as an indicator to future success. And Gabriel does a lot of things at a much higher level than all of the quarterbacks that we saw down at the Senior Bowl, but he's never going to be able to change the fact that he's 5'10". And when things get really crowded in the pocket, he simply just cannot see anything. But in terms of playing the game quickly and on time and knowing the game, ton of experience. No one's has ever started more games in college football at quarterback than him. I would never mind. I'll sign for right now him being a 4th round pick and the Giants roll with a veteran and he's your backup, and then you roll into the draft next year trying to find the guy, because you want a good backup quarterback on your roster. I think it's one of the most overlooked components to roster building, and that's a Chase Daniel type to me, where you can just, you always feel good about your backup. That's who Dillon Gabriel will be.
Yeah. I like that idea too in a later round, because I just feel like realistically, even if they get Sanders at 3, he's not starting week 1 and he's probably not starting week 5. So give whoever it is, whether it's Sanders or Gabriel, the time to develop. And then, he can play later in the season. Realistically, we're probably going to have a bad year again. So you can throw him out there week 10 and see how it goes.
Yeah. See what happens. There's, there's a safety net to him. I don't think the bottom falls out with Dylan Gabriel. And, you want more than that from your starting quarterback, obviously, but you don't want a backup quarterback situation where the bottom falls out if your top guy goes down.
Mm-hmm. So I looked at the Ourlads mock draft today, and it was round 2. So the Giants right now have the 34th pick. You have them picking the offensive lineman from North Dakota State, Gray Zabel. And I know he was a guy that came out well out of the Senior Bowl. He seemed to come in with, I feel like, a little bit of hype and went out with a lot more hype. And I think he's one of those guys, correct me if I'm wrong, that plays multiple positions on the line.
Yeah, he was a left tackle for North Dakota State, lower level of college football, and his lack of length, it doesn't show up that much at that level, but in college, he did play. He does have experience. I have his snaps in front of me, so listen to this. 974 snaps at left tackle, 453 at left guard, 222 at right guard, 1,064 at right tackle. So, yes, the vast majority of his snaps have been at either tackle position, but I don't think anyone's considering him to be outside. I don't think he saw one snap outside all week. That he played both guard spots and he played center. And in relation to the Giants' biggest hole on the offensive line right now is right guard. And I'm all about let it be an open competition between someone new, which in this case is Gray Zabel, Evan Neal, Josh Ezeudu, and if you want to bring back Van Roten or you find some Ben Bredesen type off the street, let it be a 4-man competition. What I like about Zabel, though, it goes a little beyond just 2025. It's that I think he can be a guy that is the potential replacement at center if you're not confident in John Michael Schmitz after this season. Let him play there in 2025. You'll make your call after that season. And if he does pan out, great. You have a right guard in Gray Zabel. Now you have something really to work with as you bring in a new quarterback. So Gray Zabel from day one, and I remember the first live snap that I watched offensive lineman, he stood out to me. And we tweeted about it that first day. He ends up being the offensive practice player of the week. And that's voted on by coaches, executives, GMs, like real professional evaluators. And, we've had some recent success. Cody Mauch is the most one that got drafted by Tampa Bay, I believe in the first round, who was a tackle, moved inside from the same exact program. And yes, it takes guys like that maybe a year to really get up to NFL speed. They're just, but what he looked like in Mobile tells me that he probably could be ready next year. He might not be a star, but I do think this guy is going to be a star offensive lineman within 2-3 years.
Something we so desperately need.
For everything. Yes. For passing game, running game, options as you try to build this offensive line for the long-term future. That's why I like that pick if he's there. Yeah.
One of the other guys that stood out to me was Josh Connerly from Oregon. I watched him a lot in the one-on-one battles, and I feel like he really was able to hold his own, and he was able to beat some of the guys, which some of the defensive linemen were just monstrous. So I feel like when you see guys on the offensive line that are able to be dominant in that way, it's exciting to me. Outside of Zabel, what did you think about Connerly, and were there other offensive linemen that stood out?
Yeah, Connerly he's definitely the most athletic, or maybe he's tied with the kid from Purdue, Membu, however you say his name. But I think Connerly is a little bit more refined. He's definitely a starting left tackle in the NFL. Little on the small side, a little on the light side. I am big into body types. I don't think it doesn't make decisions for me, but when I grade someone's size, it goes beyond height, weight, and length. I look at the actual body type. Example would be Kayvon Thibodeau. Did not measure in small, but if you see him in person, he doesn't fill out his pants. He's really thin calves, doesn't have a lot of power beneath the waist, and that does matter in the NFL. And I see the same kind of body type in Connerly. It's okay. It's not going to cross him off, but you can see that when he's not lined up perfectly, he does get pushed back often. Can that be developed? Yeah, he's a young kid. I think he's only 21 years old. So he's those guys, especially with offensive linemen, it matters if they're young because, we call them like the man years, like 22, 23, 24, like you're going to add bulk and strength just naturally. And it really does matter for that position. It might not matter that much for a receiver or running back, but he will get stronger at the next level, and he'll also maintain that foot speed, which is special. He really is a special athlete. But he was on the lesser end of some highlight reels. If you saw Green, the DN from Marshall, it was probably the highlight of the week where he put him flying into the air and on his back. Hey, free play is, off balance. His feet were off the ground, but that is going to happen to him at the next level. I do like him now. I'm more of a, round 2 type instead of a round 1 type. I was thinking he could be a first rounder, but I do question how ready he could be early on at the next level. But the tackle that caught my attention is a complete opposite situation. It's Anthony Belton from NC State. He measured in as one of the biggest offensive linemen there. I'll get those measurements for you in a sec, but he was, 6'5", 345, 34.5-inch arms. I mean, that is an NFL body right there. His issues on tape, despite a lot of experience, is that he just didn't play fast. He didn't react fast, but he looked really controlled in one-on-ones. He was not abandoning his technique. Some of these guys that are this big, they simply just need to learn and actually show that they know how to do that. They are so big and so powerful, they don't need to move that fast. Someone like Evan Neal, he tries to move faster than he's capable of moving, and it throws off the balance and control. If he trusted his size more, I do think we would see him lose less. Anthony Belton really started to develop that and show that during the week. So I thought he was an offensive lineman that really kind of helped himself out and maybe break a few ties.
I think there's a lot of excitement for a lot of us around the offensive line, especially after this week. So we'll see how a lot of that goes with the combine too.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, let's stick on offense for a second. 2 guys who I know, I think were on your Ourlads list too, were Jack Beck, wide receiver from TCU, and Arian Smith, Georgia wide receiver. I always say that I'll take anyone from Georgia. I know we talked about Arian Smith being a little bit on the smaller side, but the things that I saw from him, I liked. He seemed very speedy. He's able to, even though he's small, I felt like he was able to make some nice catches and make some good contesting catches. And I just felt like maybe he could be like a better version of Wandale. And I think Wandale's good. I think for Wandale, it's just the size for me. And I think Smith is a little bit bigger than him.
Yeah, he's a little bit taller, a little bit longer. Wandale Robinson was off the chart small when you're looking at wingspan and length. And what that means in layman's terms is the quarterback has almost no margin for error when you're throwing him the ball, because he's just not going to get to much away from his body because his arm's very short, his wingspan is very small, and defenders can really simply cover him up. He's always probably the smallest guy on the field when he comes out, and that's tough to throw to. That's tough when these windows get tight in the NFL. It's tough to throw to a guy that you can barely see. You just have to trust that he's going to be there. Arian Smith did measure in a little bit better, 5'11", so really 6 foot, 175. And has a little bit of length to him. His calling card is going to be speed. He was probably the fastest, the purest fastest guy down there. You didn't see that in the Zebra Technologies, the GPS tracking, but you can't always trust that. He ran a 10.18. He was on the Georgia track team. He ran a 10.18 100 meter. For those that don't know, that is elite. That's Xavier Worthy type speed. This guy, if he runs at the combine, I'll tell you this right now, it's going to be in the 4.2s. And so you take that 4.2 speed and you see, like you said, he made plays down there. And I did not love Arian Smith coming into the Senior Bowl because he drops a lot of balls. He had 10 drops this past year. That was 3rd highest in the country. And I did a little bit more research on him. Entering this season, he had been in college for 4 years. He had 20 catches over his entire career. He was not a non-factor for that Georgia offense. 2024, he finally gets the look, 48 catches. Now you're starting to think, you're trying to make some things up in your head. Maybe this is why. Maybe you're getting a hidden gem here. He just was a very inexperienced receiver. And when you're an inexperienced receiver that moves faster than almost everyone, it can be hard to consistently catch the ball. Mm-hmm. And in the game also, he made a couple of really nice plays down the field. So Arian Smith is a guy, if you want more explosive in this offense, this is a guy that I think might be there in round 4, where the Giants got Darius Slayton years ago, and he can be a huge impact player if he can fix some of the ball skills.
When you compare him and Jalen Hyatt, because it sounds like they're a little bit similar. The inexperience, Jalen Hyatt has that one good Tennessee game and that propels him. Arian Smith has the Senior Bowl. They have the speed, the drop balls a little bit. How do you compare them? Do you think that, if the Giants like someone like Jalen Hyatt, that they would go after someone like Smith?
It's a great question. And I think it's a great comparison. And yeah, I do think there are some situations where a team will look at a player like Jalen Hyatt and say, like, hey, we need to diversify our wide receiver room. The Giants will be looking for a receiver. It might be a free agent. It might be in the draft for a bigger, more physical body, right? Neighbors is the superstar, do it all, put him everywhere. We build our passing game around him. Wandale is a slot only type, shifty, put him in the backfield, throw screens to him. They need a possession guy. They need someone that on 3rd and 7 they can throw to even when he's covered up and he's going to come down with the ball. And that will not be Arian Smith. That is not Jalen Hyatt. The only situation I would see this making sense is if this coaching staff does not believe in Jalen Hyatt. And I'll tell you what, part of me thinks they don't, because I couldn't make sense of how little he was used this past year. And we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but it might be as simple as he doesn't know the playbook. He can't get off press coverage. He's not doing the way things that he's not playing well in practice, which we don't know. So if they are going to give up on him, Arian Smith is a guy I bet they have not only but circled on their draft board to give them that vertical explosive threat.
So you mean you don't believe Dable when he says that they always have good practices?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. That was one situation last year I just could not figure out. I take pride in trying to figure things out on my own, but I could not figure out why it's just, and Dable has made a habit. Someone's coaching him very well with the media because he doesn't give you anything in these interviews. So if he says someone's practicing well, it's in this ear, out that other right away.
My favorite thing was when he said that him and Jalen Hyatt have the best relationship out of him and anyone on the team. That was like the one thing that I was like,
what if I
out of your way to say that? Really? And you
would
think
Jalen Hyatt say that?
Out of anything? Yeah. Unreal. Okay, another wide receiver, Jack Beck, who I think was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. Amazing story, very sad story. His brother passed away in the New Orleans attack, and he was very emotional after the game. But he's someone who I feel like day one of the Senior Bowl seemed to stick out. Everyone was talking about him. He's a huge dude. I thought for a second he was a tight end because he's got to be well over 6 feet tall. Yep. He's one of those guys that, when you talk about 3rd and 7, someone to make the contested catches, I feel like he is the perfect person for that.
So yeah, 6'1", 214. That was one of the biggest, heaviest guys there, and definitely one of the stockiest. I mean, some of these guys that weighed what he weighed or even more, they had 2-3 inches on him. Jack Beck is a physical, thick, strong player, and it shows up everywhere. When he catches the ball and he's going to make some moves after, he can break tackles. He did it in college as well. In contested situations, that's where he shines, and that's where you're going to see people bring up Puka Nacua when you're trying to find what could this guy be at the next level. It's because even though he's not the tallest or longest, he is the most physical, and he's very good. He's very adept at getting the ball at the apex of his jump. So he just times things very well. And honestly, he's a tough mother effer. Like he will go up there into traffic, and he said, that ball is mine. He had a 62% contested catch rate in college. Anything above 50 is noteworthy, and he was above 60, and it's not because he's taller than everyone. It'd be one thing if he was 6'5", 240 or 6'5", 230. He's a pretty average athlete. He's a pretty average size guy, but he's very strong. He's very physical. And for teams that like their wide receivers to truly make an impact as blockers, they're going to love this kid.
He was one of the guys that I feel like really stood out in the one-on-ones, because it was like, it didn't matter who covered him. He caught almost every single ball that came his way.
Yeah.
Which is very impressive.
Yep. And that he was like that in college too. So again, we asked, like, what do you get out of the Senior Bowl? It's like, hey, if you have a firm belief on someone after watching all the tape, and then he only solidifies it down here in live action against good competition, it's kind of like, all right, sign, seal, deliver. I don't need to do any more work on this kid. I know who he is, and I'm moving on to the next. And he did that down there.
Yeah, it was impressive. For tight ends, I want to talk about Elijah Arroyo, because I know that he is a guy from Miami. There was a lot of hype going into the Senior Bowl with him and Cam Ward obviously both had really great seasons. And he's another guy who I think after day one, everyone was like, this is the guy, like right up there with Tyler Warren from Penn State. Do you think he surpassed Tyler Warren, is going to be the number 1 tight end to go?
I personally don't, only because I know Tyler Warren, he's been timed in the low 4.6s, and he's 6'5", he's 6'6", 250. He's bigger than Arroyo. He's faster. Arroyo might be a little bit better at like change of direction, but Tyler Warren to me is just like a freak. He did everything. He threw touchdowns. He ran for touchdowns. I mean, he made contested catches, but that's no slight to Arroyo. I thought Arroyo was the best tight end down there. And Colston Loveland is a tight end from Michigan that many think could be the top tight end in this class, or could have been the top tight end in this class heading into this past season. Arroyo now is going to be in that discussion. Could he be the second best tight end? He had some previous knee injuries early in his career, and then he kind of started breaking out this season with Cam Ward. I think he's the best ball tracker in this class, meaning you send him up the seam. You know, some of these tight ends, like Theo Johnson, for example, he's gifted, but he doesn't track the ball very well. Ball skills are not natural for him. This kid is a natural pass catcher.
Huge for the Giants. We could use someone like that.
Yeah, I think a 2 tight end package here is very possible. And I always say this around draft time because I think so many fans, especially, they're too like, hey, we need to go after this position, this position. What the Giants need to do, the Jets need to do, they need to draft good players. Yeah. And if you don't have a sure thing answer at a position, go draft that position, create a competition, create depth. In an offense like this, you can have 2 good tight ends. You know, the Bills are doing with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, where Brian Daboll has ties to. I mean, even if Theo Johnson works out and ends up being a stud, it's okay to have an Elijah Arroyo. You need offensive weapons and you need depth. So Elijah Arroyo, honestly, he's in the round 2 discussion for the Giants.
Well, and I think we all thought that it was going to be Bellinger and Theo, like that those 2 guys were going to be used in the same type of way.
How that worked out, you know?
I don't know what the deal is with Bellinger. I mean, his rookie year, he was great and then had some of those freak injuries, but I could see the Giants doing that because they need upgrades at literally every single position.
Yeah, so. They need playmakers. They have to get playmakers on this team. And I don't care what position they play.
Yeah. Is there anyone else on offense that you feel like we should talk about?
I mean, that would do it. I think in the backfield, you know, Trevor Etienne, who is Travis Etienne's brother from Georgia, 5'8", 202, really stocky build. I thought he had a really good week. And, you know, I think about the Giants, they don't need a running back, but there's so many good running backs in this class. I'd kind of be upset if they don't get one of them. And it could be day 3. You don't need to use a high pick on one, but this could kind of be an Eric Gray replacement who just has not really got his feet underneath him here. He's been given some opportunities, and I think just getting some fresh legs in is a good idea, because as much as I like Tyrone Tracy, he's not the answer, and he doesn't need to be. But if he's not the answer, there is a spot for another running back. So I did like him and a few of these other backs as well.
I would like to go back to having a 2-headed monster at the running back position. So
that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Yep.
Okay, let's move over to defense, because my favorite player, and we talked about him too, Quincy Riley, the cornerback coming out of Louisville. I think we talked a little bit about his measurements. I don't know if you have them in front of you, but he reminds me a little bit of Cordell Flott in the sense that he's definitely on the leaner side, but he's definitely bigger than Cordell Flott, has better ball skills, more athletic, very fast. Feisty. I liked that part of him too. He kind of, I don't know how you feel about this. Reminds me a little bit of Sauce Gardner.
Okay. I mean, if that's what you see, that's what you see, and you go for it. What I see in Sauce Gardner and Quincy Riley, the similarity there is that they feel the routes before they're run. They're really good. And you could see this on the practice tape. They started running routes for receivers, meaning a receiver comes off the line, and just based on body language alone or his first 2 steps, they kind of have a good educated guess on where that kid's going to go. And then, so you get a little bit of a head start, because I'll tell you what, especially in these drills at practice, it's really hard for the corners. I mean, you have no help inside, outside. You have no leverage advantage. And if you win a rep in these one-on-one reps at practice at the Senior Bowl, that is a really standout performance by you. And he had a lot of them. And it came from the fact, like Sauce Gardner, that he felt what the route was going to be prior to when the guy actually got into it. So Quincy Riley, to me, had one of the best weeks of a corner group that did surprise me. I walked away, and the Giants needed a corner. Mm-hmm. I walked away feeling very good about this cornerback class because of these guys, and knowing that 5 of the top 10 guys are not even there. So this cornerback group, I think, is going to be able to help out the Giants a lot.
Was there anyone else from the corners that you liked that were there?
Yeah, Azare Thomas from Florida State. His measurements jumped off the screen to me. He measured in at 6'1", just under 6'1 and a half, 191. Huge hands, 32.5-inch arms. So this guy, and you could see he looked different than everyone. He stood out. His hands were hanging down towards his knees. And then what you see on tape with him is how fluid his movement is. Now, it's not consistent. He's a guy, unlike Quincy Riley, it doesn't seem like he knows a ton about route recognition. And he's a young player. He's only 20 years old. Does not have a ton of experience, but it's the kind of corner that you love to see come in and you develop for a year or two. And he has the makings. He has the Sauce Gardner traits to be that kind of player. Quincy Riley is a little limited with his traits. They're not bad, but he's going to be a limited player because of those traits, most likely. Where this kid's ceiling is through the roof. Him and Maxwell Harrison were 2 guys that I really liked just because of the competitiveness in them. Azare Thomas had a couple picks on the last day that I was there on Thursday in the red zone. That's where you feel really confident with him in relation to this defense, is that when you get to limit the space that they have to cover, you get to use the back of the end zone and the boundaries. He's a very hard guy to throw the ball over. And quarterbacks don't like throwing the ball near those guys with all that length, all that speed, and those ball skills. So that's a guy that I think is worth keeping an eye on. Day 2 of the draft.
Day 2. Okay. Couple other guys I liked. So I posted a video. Smail Mondin Jr., linebacker from Georgia, had, I think, a really good Tuesday, Wednesday practice. And then Thursday, he just kind of had a tough day. And in one of the one-on-one drills that they were doing, I recorded it and posted it, and he just got beat by it might've been the running backs. Mm-hmm. And Turbo Miller DM'd me and was like, there is no linebacker who is covering that correctly. Just the way that route is run, he's going to get beat every time. And I was like, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better, because he's a guy that I loved. Like I said, I love my Georgia players, but he just really stuck out to me from the linebackers. On some of the earlier days, the way that he was in coverage, he was able to keep up with the wide receivers. He seems like he's quick, he's shifty, he's made good tackles when, they were actually tackling. Yep. So I was impressed with him.
Yeah. I mean, you have good notes on him because this kid was an offensive star in high school. He was a quarterback, running back, and wide receiver in high school. And he showed up to Georgia as a defensive back. That's where he has started off. And they put some weight on. They said, hey, SEC, the way the NFL is going now, we want athletes at linebacker. So they moved him to linebacker in 2022. And he shined in a star-studded offense. He's one of those guys, you kind of just notice him right away. He moves different. He looks different. Doesn't have the best, I would say, instincts and feel for post-snap. He does lose leverage a lot, meaning he puts himself into a lot of bad positions because he's a little late to recognize, which is a big part of playing a linebacker. But the amount of experience he has and the previous history in coverage, he's a guy that athletically he can cover. He can hang with tight ends. He can hang with running backs. He can hang with some wide receivers, especially in some zone coverage. You would just hope that if you draft him at some point, he's going to get a little bit better at the instinctual IQ part of the game. And if he does, he's got those traits. And that's what the NFL wants at linebacker now. They want athletes. And we're now starting to see running backs taking over the league again because they're putting smaller defenders at linebacker. So the market might correct itself in that regard, but he's the kind of linebacker the NFL is looking for right now. So another good name to keep an eye on there.
Yeah, I liked him. And I also like Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon.
Yeah.
And then Shamar James, also another linebacker who came on towards the end of the week and did really well in the one-on-one drills. He really stuck to his guy and made some good plays. I think there was a lot of talk about Billy Bowman too, who shined towards the second part of the week. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, 5'10", 198, short arms, and he's kind of like the Dylan Gabriel of the defense, where you look at him like, man, I like him, but he is small. And because of that, And because he was one of the worst tackling safeties in the nation last year, just a lot of missed tackles. I mean, he's an all or nothing type when he goes for the tackle. He kind of just puts his head down. He tries to trip you up and he misses a lot, but he has like a playmaking trait to him that some teams love. And he made a couple of the nicest interceptions of the week. And one of them was on a Jalen Milroe pass where he ran the route for the receiver. And then I went back and watched some of their practice tape. And I'm like, you know what? His best film came at nickel. And that's the position the Giants are currently employing Andrew Phillips at. So I don't know if he's really would be in the scope for the Giants, but just in terms of projecting him to the NFL, his grades, I bet some teams will have a day 3 grade on him and not consider him till then. And then other teams are going to have a round 2 grade on him. So it really just going to come down to those teams that do like him. Will they really want to pursue that position when he's available when they're on the clock? Because he is a playmaker. He is a fun kid to watch. He's a tone setter. He's a leader. He's gonna bring energy to a defense. You want all of that, but some teams, they just don't want that small guy back there that can't tackle because they are your last line of defense.
We already have a tackling problem, so
we do. Yeah, they do.
Lack of tackling, should I say. Okay, any other defensive players that stuck out to you? Because we're already at 45 minutes.
Yeah, I would say up front, this Senior Bowl week really did confirm to me that this defensive line class, inside and outside, is both talented and deep. And I don't want to play the game. Oh, maybe you wait till round 3, round 4 to get one because it's so deep. You start playing that game, you start really passing on good players, and here you are. You end up in a really bad position. But the Giants' defensive line is on the table in round 2. And if you go elsewhere, that's okay. There's going to be one there round 3. If you don't care, it's okay. Just follow the board. Darius Alexander from Toledo he has some Leonard Williams in him because he can play outside, he can play inside. And I'm telling you, especially in the game, nobody could block him. I mean, he just does not stay blocked for a long time. And it's a combination of power, length, desire, and just sheer attitude. I mean, the guy plays so hard, and he's a much better athlete than I thought. And you can go down the list of a lot of defensive players that really impressed me. Yahya Black from Iowa, 6'6", 337, 35-inch arms. That is a Dexter Lawrence body. He did not have the college career as a pass rusher that Dexter Lawrence did, but he was probably probably the most physical defensive lineman down there. And I think this would be a great situation for him. You could probably get him day 3 as well. A better version of Jordan Riley, who's backing up Dexter Lawrence right now, and a guy that I really do feel like could learn a lot from Dexter Lawrence, because Dexter Lawrence, what he's doing right now, he was not doing that early in his career. He got better every year because he learned how to use his elite level length. And this guy has elite level length, and he's not a bad athlete. So that's another name just to keep an eye on as a day 3 pick. The last one I'll give you, I wrote him up while I was down there. Donovan Izuruku from Boston College, a little on the undersized side. I don't know if that's what the Giants are really going to look for, but the Giants need to look for who is going to be their next edge defender should Kayvon Thibodeau not be here next year. So he's a guy that if they want to get someone a little bit undersized from a height, weight, speed perspective, he's got really long arms. He's a guy that I thought really stood out with his ability to turn the corner, play underneath the pads of blockers, and make things happen in the pass game.
Okay. But I was really impressed with a lot of guys. And one thing that when I briefly talked to Joe Shane, I asked him if there were any position groups that stuck out to him. And I don't know, maybe he just didn't want to say anything, but he was like, you're talking about the best of the best players coming out of college. And it really is the best. And it makes it so fun to watch because you're really seeing, like you talked about earlier, like you're seeing guys go against future pros, and to really get, that battle is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, this tape it's not as much tape as you watch from the season, but I'll say it's probably more valuable to watch this tape. You get more out of watching, let's say 15 snaps of this practice tape is probably more valuable than 80 snaps that you're going to watch in college, because these are all NFL players and they're all playing for jobs. Like they all have a reason to perform right now. They're not up 36-7 in the middle of October on a Saturday night. Like these guys are playing their balls off so that they can get drafted and make money and fulfill their childhood dream. And when that psychology is going on between the ears of all these players, it really helps when you evaluate them. It helps to get to know them in a way. Like, what are they like? I watch these guys in between plays. That's why I like to get there early sometimes, just watch how they operate after a coach tells them to do something. Do they fix it, or do they go back to their old tricks? And tell you what, there's a few guys that didn't fix their issues, and that kind of bothers me, and that could be a tiebreaker. And that's why the NFL, getting to meet these guys, because they have meetings with these teams and players every night and coach them on the field, it gives you that last bit of intel is, who is this person that we're drafting to our team? We know what he is on tape and on the field, but who is he? And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways anybody can get from the Senior Bowl week.
Yeah. And that's Kafka talked about that a little bit during his presser too, is the qualities and the things that they're focused on this week when they're meeting with the guys is, the big one is, are they a team player?
Yep.
And sometimes I think about that and it surprises me a little bit that they drafted Kayvon.
Yeah.
We still always get that from him.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like there was, even this, I can't speak for him. It's just speculation on my end, but I feel like you kind of get pressured into making picks sometimes, and I know these guys aren't using people like me and you as reasons why they're going to draft someone, but social pressure, media pressure is a real thing. And Kayvon Thibodeaux was the next big thing when he came out of high school. Then he was the next big thing after his freshman year. Just like the wide receiver, Jeff Smith from Ohio State. Everyone's saying he's already the best. Well, you know what? He's not. And he still has a few more things to do to prove that he can be a big-time player at the NFL. And I think to wrap that up, I think one of the worst things an evaluator can do, a scout can do, is let their own confirmation bias make decisions for them. You should always challenge your thoughts in this industry and try to almost prove yourself wrong to actually confirm that you believe what you say you believe. An initial instinct on a player is not always right. And some people just don't have the ego to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's true. And I was thinking about that with Kayvon, is that would they actually trade him if they get someone like Abdul Carter, if they don't re-sign Aziz, however this offseason goes? And I don't know if they would, because he's their draft pick, but
Myles Garrett's available.
Yeah, there we go.
Straight up. We'll take Myles Garrett. You guys take Kayvon Thibodeaux. See you, bye.
Yeah. Perfectly even trade. I'm in. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Tell us where we can find you. We know you've got so at Ourlads, they have a YouTube channel. Your Twitter is Dave _
it's Ourlads _Sy.
Okay.
Yeah, Ourlads _Sy, SY.
And then 3 times a week you have the newsletter.
3 times new newsletter. Draft guide is currently being built, sending reports in every day. You order that by mid-March. You'll get it in April before the draft. And yeah, we have a lot of stuff planned. We have on the website, you're going to have the Ourlads Mock Draft 2.0 coming out the week after the Super Bowl. So about 2 weeks from now, once the draft order is set, and we compare some notes with the Ourlads staff. We'll have a new top 32 out, and every mock draft we're going to try to add a round. So our first one was just 1 round. I threw a second rounder built off that newsletter. That was just exclusive for newsletter people, but an official Ourlads Mock Draft 2 rounder will be out in 2 weeks. And then we'll dive right into combine coverage.
Okay. Awesome. A lot coming up. A lot to be excited about.
Right. Great time of year.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yep. No problem. We'll see you soon.